All right, well, good afternoon and welcome to the Acreage and Grain Stocks Briefing. My name is Lance Honig. I am the chair of the Agricultural Statistics Board here at NASS. This briefing is for the Secretary of Agriculture and other policymakers at USDA to better understand the content and context of today's reports. We're very pleased to have Robert Bonney. He is the USDA Undersecretary for Farm Production and Conservation, and he joins us today as the Secretary Designate. We also welcome Dr. Seth Meyer, USDA's Chief Economist. Mr. Secretary, Dr. Meyer, as you probably can see looking around the room, we have a number of visitors with us today. Our good friend Mark Ray has a group of students who are part of the Demmer Scholars Internship Program joining us today. In addition to those folks, we also have a variety of other USDA staff and interns with us today. And we even have a family member with us today. So kind of a wide range of folks today. So welcome to all of you today. Even though they're not in the room with us at the moment, I'd like to express our appreciation to some of our field staff who did come in to assist us with today's reports. That would include Brian Ardoin from our Northwest Regional Field Office, Tony Dahlman from the Upper Midwest, and Lawrence Hartway from the Northeastern Regional Field Office. So thank you to them. Before I turn things over to our presenter, I do have a few notes for our live streaming audience. The Acreage and Grain Stocks reports are considered principal federal economic indicator reports. The Office of Management and Budget provides specific guidance on how these important reports are to be released. OMB statistical policy instructs policymaking officials to refrain from making public comment within 30 minutes of the release of these reports. Therefore, we will not be taking questions from the public during this briefing. However, NASS staff are available for phone or email questions, and NASS will host a social media event at 1:15 Eastern Time this afternoon. We always strive to have everything presented at this briefing match the official record. However, should there be any discrepancy, always refer to the official published estimates. With that, I'll turn things over to Nick Streff. Nick is the acting chief of the crops branch here at NASS. Nick.
All right. Thank you and welcome everyone. We have quite a few things to cover today, so we'll get started with our acreage, grain stocks, and rice briefing. So first, let's talk about our data sources for today. Our first data source is our June agricultural survey. That is where we sample farmers and ranchers across the country to ask them what they have planted and their storage of grain and oil seeds on their farms. That sample size was nearly 64,000, and that data collection happened from May 30th to June 16th. Our second data collection effort was our June area survey. This is where we actually sample pieces of land across the country. We call them segments. We had just over 9,000 segments we visited from May 20th to June 15th, also asking similar questions, noting who operates that land and what they have planted there. And then our last data collection effort would have been our off-farm grain stock survey, where we sample roughly 8,200 commercial grain storage facilities to collect the data of grain stored at those commercial facilities. The map at the lower part of this slide denotes the June Ag survey and the sample sizes and how they're distributed across the U.S. This next slide here is noting those June area segments, those 9,000 segments, and how they are distributed across the U.S. You will notice the darker the color, the more samples per state. And you will notice that, you know, in the bigger row crop areas, states, the sample sizes are larger. Okay, for the June acreage survey, we do ask farmers and ranchers what they have left to be planted. As we realized when we visited them, planting may not be complete. So for corn, farmers and ranchers, they told us that 3.36 million acres have yet to be planted for this season at the time when we talked to them in early June. And for soybean acres, they told us that there were 12.8 million acres left to be planted for this growing season. I also like to remind you that NASS will review planted acreage again in August with updated FSA certified acreage data and make any potential adjustments at that time. This is a new timeline NASS shared with the data users community last August and at the fall data users meeting. So that is when we will take another look at those planted acres. All right, moving on to our first estimate here, just to kind of know our 22 principal crop acres and where their acreage ended up. So we're sitting at 315 million acres of principal crop acres. Those crops are noted in the blue box at the bottom of that slide. That's up 0.6% from our March intentions report, but down 1.4% from last year. Looking at our principal crop acres over time, you can see how the 315 fits in. We are down from last year, but we are in line with other years, most notably 2021. Looking at those principal crop acres by state, this is what this graphic is showing, and also how to read this. The state shaded blue represent an increase from the previous estimate. The state shaded red represent a decrease. The darker the shade, the larger the percent change. The top number for each state represents the current estimate. The bottom number is the percent change comparison. So this chart is comparison to our previous estimate, which would be the March intentions report. You can see we have a mix of increases and decreases across the country when comparing to March. And if we look at last year, you can see overall a few more red states come in there because we are down from last year, that 1.4%. A few states to note here is some of the larger decreases I will point out would be Missouri and Oklahoma. The majority of that change is a result of decreasing hay acres in both states. They had near record hay acres in those states previous years, and they're going back to more normal hay acreage harvested expectations. Now we will start moving through the individual crops. This chart is showing the corn planting progress from the weekly crop progress and condition survey. The 2024 year is represented by the red line, and we can see for corn from late April through early May, the corn planting progress did slow, but sped back up mid-May on, and planting was nearly complete by June 9th. Looking at our corn planted estimate at 91.5 million acres, that's up 1.44 million acres from the March intentions, or up 3.7 million acres from last year. Seeing how that corn acreage compares over recent history, see how that 91.5 fits in. And then if we look at it in comparison to the March intentions, you can see both red states, blue states, and several states with no change from those March intentions. If you see a pound sign after any state, that would denote a record. We do have a record planted acreage noted in orange. Looking at the change year over year, more red states here, as the corn acreage is down 3.3% from the previous year. But we do have a pocket in the middle of the country there, most notably Colorado, Nebraska, and Kansas are showing up from the previous year, and Iowa showing no change. In our June acreage report, we do ask producers what type of seed they have planted. So corn biotech seed use is similar to previous year, with over 90% of farmers utilizing some form of biotech seed. Next, we will move on to the industry expectation versus the NASS estimate. This chart shows the industry relation to the NASS estimate, where each blue dot represents an individual analyst published estimate. The red dot represents the NASS estimate. You can see NASS at that 91.5 million acres is just outside the trade range. It's hard to see on this graph, but the high end of the trade range was 91.3. So NASS is about 200,000 acres outside the trade range for corn. Okay, moving on to soybeans. Soybean planting progress was similar to corn in that it was a little bit slow through late April and mid-May, but then picked up speed again, and by June was over 90% planted. The soybean estimate, we are sitting at 86.1 million acres. That's down 0.5% from the March intentions, but up 3% or 2.5 million acres from last year. You look at how that soybean is comparison back to 2015, how it fits in, rebound from last year. And then if we look at a comparison by state back to the previous estimate in March, you can see that we're expecting a record high in Kentucky, and we have a mix of increases and decreases when looking at comparison to the prospective plantings report. However, when you look at last year, since overall soybeans is up 3%, you do see more blue states up here when compared to the previous year. We also asked soybean biotech seed use, and the biotech percent is at a record high, 96% for soybeans for this coming year. The NASS estimate versus the industry expectations. NASS is on the low end of the cluster, but within the industry expectations, the lowest industry expectation was at 85.5 million acres, and NASS is sitting at 86.1. Something we like to do for the June acreage report is to kind of compare the corn and soybean acres together to show you where the two largest row crops and the amount of acres devoted to them. So we can see when you compare at the national level, going back to March, it's up 0.6% at 177.6 million acres total devoted to corn and soybean acreage. And if you look at it year over year, a few more red states pop in there as the total estimate is down 0.4% from the previous year. The industry expectations, as we put those together, you can see March, NASS was below the industry expectations. However, moving on to June, NASS moved up and that we are within those industry expectation ranges at the moment. Let's move on to cotton. At 11.7 million acres is up 9.3% from March and 14.1% from last year. Looking at cotton going back to 2015, a rebound from last year, a little bit more less drought in the cotton growing areas, so more planted acres there. And if we look at a going back to the March estimate, 6 states are increasing with Texas leading the charge there. Texas is up 890,000 acres from the March intentions. And when you look at it year over year, Texas is up 851,000 acres from last year. So Texas is driving a lot of the change in cotton acreage for this year. We do ask upland cotton biotech seed use. So we have with 96% of the cotton crop is utilizing a biotech seed. Now, cotton expectations, NASS was within the range in March, but with the big increase from March to now, NASS is outside the range. The trade range, the top end blue dot there is 11.2 million acres, and NASS's estimate is at 11.7 million acres. Moving on to winter wheat at 33.8 million acres, we're down 1% from March and down 7.9% from last year. If we look at how that compares over time, if you compare the harvested to planted ratio for winter wheat, we are sitting at 76.3%. So that would be the highest H2P ratio since 2019. So farmers are expecting to harvest more wheat for grain this year. Look at the change going back to March, not a lot of change there, a lot of no change states within there. A few states are down. Then if you look at going back to last year with a near 8% decrease, there are going to be quite a few more red states that are going to appear. Only Montana and Washington are expected to increase in planted acres for this year. Looking at the industry expectations, NASS is just outside the range. The low end of the industry expectations is 34 million acres, and NASS is just below that at that 33.8 million acres. Looking at spring wheat, the estimate is 11.3 million acres. That's down 65,000 acres from March, but up 70,000 acres from last year. You can see how the spring wheat acres compares going back to 2015. Currently, we're sitting at the first time in recent history that we would have consecutive yearly increases for spring wheat. If you look at spring wheat expectations compared to March, you can see North Dakota is up 5.7%. They are the top of spring wheat producing state. The other two major states are down, being Montana and Minnesota. However, when we look year over year, you can see Minnesota is up 19% from the previous year. With trade expectations here, NASS is within the trade range at that 11.3 million acres. One more wheat crop to go. Durum wheat at 2.17 million acres is up 6.8% from March and up 29.2% from last year. You can see for durum wheat, this would be the highest planted acreage since 2017. Looking at it in comparison to March, NASS is up 6.8%. So 3 of the 4 program states are up. But a better chart to look at is the change from previous year. All 4 states are up 24% or more from the previous year. So increases across the board for durum wheat. Now, trade expectations, the top of the trade range, their industry expectations is 2.1 million acres, and NASS is sitting at 2.17. So 70,000 acres above the highest trade expectation. Several more crops to go through here today. We have barley at 2.56 million acres. That's down 17.5% from last year. We're expecting record low acreage in Colorado, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Canola at 2.6 million acres is up from March and last year. This would be a record high planted and harvested acres for canola at 2.66 million acres planted. Chickpeas at 502,000 acres is up 34.8% from last year. This is the highest planted since 2018, and all 4 estimating states are up from last year. Dry edible beans at 1.4 million acres are up 15.2%. 7 of the 8 estimating states in that program are up from last year. Dry edible peas at 1.03 million acres are up 6.9% from last year. This would be the highest dry edible peas planting since 2019. Moving on to flaxseed at 140,000 acres is down 21% from last year. This would be the lowest total since 1996. North Dakota, the largest flax producing state, is down 14% from last year. Looking at alfalfa hay at 5.6 million acres, we're down slightly from last year. Other hay at 35.9 million acres is down 3.5% from last year. We have lentils at 836,000 acres, are up 53.1% from last year, the highest U.S. planted acreage since 2017. Montana alone is up 260,000 acres from last year for lentils. Mustard seed at 218,000 acres is down 11% from last year. Oats at 2.3 million acres is down 10% from last year. We're expecting record lows for planted in Idaho, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Peanuts at 1.76 million acres is up 6.8% from last year. Potatoes at 940,000 acres are down 2.5%. Proso millet is down 27.3%. Colorado, the largest acreage state, is down 120,000 acres from last year for proso millet. Rapeseed at just over 20,000 acres is up 53% from last year, and this would be a record high planting. Rice at 2.94 million acres is up 1.7% from last year. Rye at 2.2 million acres is down 3.9% from last year. Safflower at 127,000 acres is down 1.9% from last year, and this is a U.S. Record planted low for safflower. Sorghum at 6.4 million acres is down 11% from last year. Planted acres in Kansas and Texas, the 2 largest acreage states, they are both down 400,000 in each state. Sorghum planted. Sugar beets at 1.1 million acres are down 2.4% from last year, the lowest planted acres since 2008. Sugar beets. Sugarcane at 909,000 acres harvested is down 2.2%. Sunflower at 899,000 acres is down 31.7% from last year and would be the lowest planted acre since 1976. We're expecting record lows for the all sunflowers for California, Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska. And tobacco at 164,000 harvested acres is down 12.6% from last year. This will be the lowest on record for tobacco. Now, the next few slides here show those 22 principal crops just in different formats. So our first one here is just the total acres allocated to each crop. So you can see the corn, soybeans, hay, and winter wheat, kind of the main crops are the top four. You can see how they compare to the rest of the crops. Now, if we look at that change from March, from those intentions to when producers actually got things planted, you can see that corn is up 1.4 million, while soybeans is down 410,000 acres. And then when we look at those same crops, but compare it back to last year, this is the percent change year over year. So chickpeas up 34.8% from the previous year, while sunflowers are down at 31.7%. And then the final slide on the principal crop acres is showing change in acres total. So soybeans are up 2.5 million acres, while corn is down 3.166 million acres from the previous year. Okay, let's move on to stocks. So grain stocks. For the small grains, this is considered the ending stocks as we move to the harvest for the next crop. For row crops, the stocks represent the third quarter estimate. So the on-farm stocks represent the number stored on farms when we talk to those farmers and ranchers across the country. And then the off-farm stocks represent the total stored at those commercial facilities from that off-farm grain stocks survey. So for wheat, all wheat stocks stored in all positions totaled 702 million bushels. That is up 23.3% from last year. On-farm stocks are up 11.7%. Off-farm stocks are up 26.5%. So both categories are up there. And if we look at this next chart here, the blue bar represents the beginning supply for each crop. And then each line represents a quarterly stocks estimate. So for wheat, this would be the ending stocks estimate or the fourth quarter. The all wheat beginning supply was at 2.38 billion bushels. That's up 2.5% from the previous season. And then the March to May disappearance was 387 million bushels, down 4% from the previous year for stocks. If we look at the stocks comparison to the industry expectations, NASS is at the high end, but within the trade range. Looking at corn stocks in all positions totaled 4.99 billion bushels. That's up 21.7% from last year. On-farm stocks are up 36.5% and off-farm stocks are up 4.3%. So you can see on-farm stocks are driving that increase there. If we look at the beginning supply for corn, we had 16.7 billion bushels. That was up 11.1% from the previous season. Corn disappearance for this last quarter was 3.36 billion bushels, up 2% from the previous year. The corn stocks expectations at 4.99 billion bushels. We are on the high end, but NASS is within the industry expectations. Soybean stocks in all positions total 970 million bushels, up 21.8%. On-farm stocks are up 44.4%, while off-farm stocks are up 6.4%. So once again, that off-farm driving the stocks increase. If we look here, the soybean beginning supply is at 4.43 billion bushels, down 2.6% from the previous season. And the disappearance from March to May was 875 million bushels. Here is the chart showing the industry expectations for soybeans compared to the NASS estimate. So right within the range there. And moving on to rice stocks in all positions totaled 60.1 million hundredweight. That's up 37.3%. And a lot of the increase is due to increased production in acreage from last year. On-farm stocks are up 22.5% and off-farm is up 39%. Looking at the rice stocks beginning supply at 243 million hundredweight, that's up 25.8% from the previous year. And disappearance for the March to May quarter was at 43.6 million hundredweight. A few other crops for storage to cover. I will walk you through those. So barley in all positions totaled 77.9 million bushels. That's up 18% from the previous year. Canola in all positions was up 2.7% from the previous year. For canola, this would be an all canola stocks record high. Chickpeas in all positions totaled 1.4 million hundredweight. That's down 9.2%. Dryable peas in all positions totaled 2.5 million hundredweight, down 38.9%. Flaxseed in all positions were down 19% from the previous year. Lentils in all positions are down 28.2%. Oats in all positions are up 4.2% from last year. Rye in all positions totaled 799,000 bushels, down 33.7% from last year. Sorghum in all positions totaled 49.8 million bushels, down 6% from last year. Durum wheat in all positions was down 24% from last year. This would be the second lowest total durum stocks on record. And rapeseed is at 1.28 million pounds. All right, that brings you to the end of the data for today's report. Upcoming reports for NASS include that on July 1st, the current agricultural industrial reports will be released. July 12th, crop production. July 19th, cattle on feed, and July 31st, agricultural prices. As Lance mentioned, please join him later this afternoon at 1:15 Eastern for a stat chat on X, where he will take your questions on acreage, grain stocks, and the rice stocks. As always, all of our reports are available at nass.usda.gov, and you can send questions to the email address noted below. Thank you for coming today.